Okay, I think we should start. So I'd like to welcome all of you to this session of Networking Fridays organized by the Air Center. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce Martin Visbeck, that is going to give a talk. And Martin is a professor for physical oceanography at the GEOMAR and also at Kiel University. Its coordinator was the coordinator of Atlantos project, and it is now the leading figure of the Atlantos program that followed, and that is going to let us know a little bit more about. And he's also a member of the executive planning group of the Ocean Decade that we also will hear about, and that we are hearing about a lot lately. And he's also very involved in GOOS and GeoBlue Planet, also member of the International Science Council, and many other things that I could be here naming. But I think it's much better to hear him talking about ocean sustainability, so from ocean observations to sustainable development, and really also looking at the Atlantos, and also another initiative that is very linked with, that is the digital twin of the ocean. So please, Martin, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Isabel, for these kind words of welcome. Thank you to the Networking Fridays initiative of the Air Center. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us all to meet and discuss and exchange, in particular during those times of the pandemic where traveling and meeting in person is so hard to do. So thanks for the opportunity. I would like to take you on a journey to discuss issues around ocean sustainability, but really starting it from an ocean observing perspective, and then see how we can connect it right through to sustainable development. So let me start with an image of our planet Earth. And here you see the lights at night on our planet. And I think many of you have seen images like that, or maybe even that particular image, which I think so graphically shows you how many of us are living on this planet on the one hand, but also how much we like to live near the ocean on the coasts. So something must be special about, for us humans, like Isabel living on the coast here, for her in Porto, me in Kiel. And it is not that we just like the ocean and we like to enjoy it, but I think in today's world, it's also good economic reasons. For example, if you look at an image of the world trade, the international trade, which by the way, was almost unabatedly going on during pandemic times. And if you live near a harbor or port city, that is a huge economic advantage. And there's no surprise that coastal regions are rapidly growing in size, population, and importance. Now, the number of people on our planet and where we live is shown on this graph. So every little red dot is a major city. And it's also interesting to note that of 20 mega cities, about 13 of them are coastal, near the ocean. And I think, again, there's no surprise because it is a real economic advantage to live near the ocean and the coast, to partake in the global economy. If you put some numbers around that, and this graph shows you how many people actually live on our planet. So when I was born, and I think Isabel is a bit younger than me, we had about 3 billion people on our planet. Today we have 7.5 billion. So we doubled in size in our lifetimes, which is enormous. There's not a single generation that we know of in Earth's history, of human history, that doubled in one generation. And the UN and the experts at the UN say that will probably not happen again. The expectation for the number of people on the planet is around 10 billion. And it's also probably interesting to note that if we were to double up to 16 billion, there's real questions whether that's actually possible from an ecological point of view. There's also not so much a chance that we're going to be much less than we are right now, unless major pandemics like the one that we are at will actually take out a lot of population, or we have a war. Both things, unfortunately, are very unlikely. And it's also in part because of technological advances, for example, that we can dealing with pandemics today much better than in previous times. But if you look at that growth in population, it not happened in Europe. Europe is the green bar on this graph here, and you can almost see that in Isabel's and my lifetime, we added a little bit, but not that many. It has really been in Asia where the big growth has happened. And what's exciting to see in the next 50 years looking forward, much of the growth will happen in Africa. And it's really interesting to note that the capacity, the knowledge about the ocean and in our planet in general is growing dramatically in Asia, but I don't think that Africa is just there yet. And it's the continent I think we should all work with and think about what their role is also in ocean sciences. So, but we only have one planet and one ocean to go around for maybe 9 billion people. So it's clear that that development needs to respect planetary boundaries. And we just saw on Isabel's backdrop, biodiversity is an enormous dimension of challenge. We worry about that. Climate and climate change is another one. Ocean acidification is another one. And also the depletion of resources in the ocean or land and many other of these boundaries. But I do like that perspective too, that on the outside keeps the planetary boundaries, ocean being one of them, and on the inside puts us humans, that we as humans want access to water, income, education, resilience, voice, jobs, energy, societal equity, gender equality, health, and food. And that is true for every person around the Atlantic, whether you're on an island or you're living inland, and actually for every person around the planet. And how can we organize ourselves to equitably, share our planet and define this so-called safe and just operating space for humanity is a challenge. And during pandemic times, that comes on even more to the fore. So in 2015, global cooperation was high on everybody's agenda, and these sustainable development goals in the Agenda 2030 were articulated, 17 of them. But also there was the first World Conference in Sendai on disaster risk reduction, the urban agenda, the Paris Climate Agreement, and all of them are really thinking about, from a policy point of view, how can we take care of our environment in a more sustainable way. And I'm glad that somehow the ocean managed to be noted by having its own goal, the SDG 14. And there's an interesting history how that came about. I happened to be invited to some of the discussions in New York at the UN about that. But it really was small island states like the Azores, like Cape Verde, like many others, Seychelles, Papua New Guinea, and so on. They really made the case that from an islander's perspective, the ocean is the #1 important and relevant goal. Now I want to bring that back to ocean sciences and sustainability. A lot of the science that we do in our universities and research institutions, also on the Azores, is to try to understand better or to articulate what pressures, environmental pressures we are generating by a growing human population and more affluence. And these are things like warming of the ocean, sea level rise, loss of biodiversity, ocean acidification, or pollution, plastics here in this particular image. Now that is a bit of a challenge because this our community, our ocean science community, is seen to be on the bad news side. We just talk about the pressures, the bad things, the things we don't want to happen about our ocean. But I will say there's quite a healthy set of research happening also at our institutions about resilience, about looking at the future, about how can we use, for example, regrow mangroves, protect corals, save the biodiversity, and really use what we these days call nature-based solutions for the future. So resilience and the science about resilience, I think, is coming even more to the fore as a balance to the science about articulating the pressures and the challenges going forward. At the end of the day, I think collectively, we're looking at the ocean and our environment as a source for prosperity. We're talking about blue and green growth. We're talking about using the ocean in a smart and sustainable way going forward to actually support the lives and livelihoods of that growing population, soon to be 9 or 10 billion on this planet. Now, I want to take a different perspective on that. So how can we untangle that challenge that I just outlaid to you in a sort of methods and a methodology approach about science that we can do? And I'm sometimes using this so-called value cycle or benefit cycle. And it starts for me on the top with discovery, observing, mapping of the sphere of interest, in our case, the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean more particularly. Once we've done that at universities and research institutes, we try to understand what we see. We don't stop on the mapping. We're trying to understand the processes around it. And that is what universities in many ways are all about, deeply scientific. And sometimes we get lucky, we can actually predict and we can use models to say something about the future. All of this is in the science side of what we do. On the left-hand side, although here's society, it's the actors, the decision makers. They probably cannot even understand the title of a paper that Isabel and I will be writing in our scientific journals. So we need to transfer our knowledge in a form that society can understand. And this is where the assessments come in, climate assessments, biodiversity assessments, many other assessments in our community that we have, also the ocean assessment for sure. And it's together when we make this knowledge available that our societal actors are willing to govern, act, and change things around us, including the ocean. But often they come back to us and say, well, if you want to protect the ocean, how do we do this? Where do we do it? What is the right approach? And again, it brings challenge back to the mapping, understanding, and prediction. So there's a circular value circle that enables us to really do that. So I'm going to speak about two elements more specifically. First, I want to start with observations. In many ways, our students are living in a great era of a lot of knowledge and observations. On the top here, you see the remote sensing also of the ocean. It is just fantastic, the amount of satellite missions which are available already and just about to be launched that also look at the ocean. And here I'm highlighting CIIMAR, the Committee on Earth Observing, that really organizes the satellites constellations around the globe, and in particular the Copernicus systems in Europe, which is probably the world's premier Earth observing system, which has also a lot of eyes and sensors on the ocean. Unfortunately for us in the marine sciences, that you cannot so easily look into the ocean with remote sensing. So we're complementing that view from space with in situ system. And here the global ocean observing systems is the international effort around that, that really organizes and connects all the various networks, whether they're ship-based, buoy-based, airplane-based, or robotic-based in the ocean. And we had developed one of these elements of the global ocean observing system in the Atlantic by really bringing together that Atlantic observing system under the program and project Atlantic. Atlantis, in a used to be a Horizon 2020 project, and we set out to really improve the international collaboration around ocean observing. It's about promoting engagement and innovation, facilitating free and open access of the information. I'll talk about digital twin oceans in a moment, but it's really important to enabling and develop methods of achieving quality and authority of ocean information. And we're using actors like GEO, Blue Planet, and the Global Ocean Observing System. But very importantly, we are right now in a great place in the Atlantic community that we also have policy agreements about the Galway Statement that connects Europe, Canada, and the United States, but also the Berlin Statement that connects Europe, South Africa, Brazil, but also Argentina, Cape Verde, and others. And these agreements really help us on the political level to work together in ocean affairs, including ocean observing. And I want to share with you now some perspectives from some of the actors that helped us at the end of the program of the Atlantis to go from a project into Atlantis, the program. So listen to what they have to say. So Atlantis is an initiative that brings together various actors which focus on Atlantic Ocean observing. And the idea of Atlantis is to bring together the various activities from physics, chemistry, biology, geology, to really elevate the level of how we do ocean observing for the benefit of society. The achievements of Atlantis is one of community building. So it brings together people from the European countries, from Canada, United States, Brazil, South Africa, but also Argentina and Cape Verde, one community that looks at the whole Atlantic observing system. We've also advanced technology. We're bringing new sensors to the system. We're integrating up more complex, more complete observing technologies. And we use that information to assess how the Atlantic Ocean is evolving and getting a better idea where it's heading.
From really early on in the project, we realized that we needed to add more biological observations into the program of Atlantis. This was really needed to understand the full ocean ecosystem, and also because a lot of the product the society demanded from us really require biological observation of the organisms that live in the sea, the animals, the algae, and all the components actually of the biodiversity of the ocean.
The Atlantis project provides a great step, a leap forward in our ability to understand the ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is connected to the rest of the global ocean. Now we would like to use the successes from the Atlantis project and roll that out to the rest of the global ocean and improve the observing system to get that global picture and get a quantum leap in the information and the science we can get from the ocean.
In Atlantis, the program, we foresee a shift from what at present is ocean observing with primarily a scientific focus towards ocean observing with a focus on meeting societal needs. We also want this program to be transparently open to all potential partners, fishing companies like transportation companies, aquaculture, who have a real stake, a real need in this ocean data that we're seeking to enable.
So my dream for the Atlantis program is that all the nations in the North Atlantic, Tropical Atlantic, South Atlantic come together to engage in ocean observing, because it's those data that we get from the ocean that allows us to make decisions how human and oceans interact in a much more sustainable way. So we're looking for a bright, prosperous and equitable future for next generations. Some flavor of the various actors of how we see today observing in the ocean. I sometimes like to say we're trying to go from an expert activity that research organizations do, so from niche, if you want to say, from a societal perspective, to the norm. The norm is something we always do, even in pandemic times and tough times, because it is so vital for us in society. And the reason why we would do that is showing here in this particular slide, where at the top you see societal needs for ocean information. It could be biodiversity, it could be ship routing, it could be informing about risks like tsunamis, harmful algae bloom, sea level rises, but it could also be opportunities about sustainable mariculture, fishing culture, maybe sequestering carbon in the ocean, maybe getting some renewable energies from the ocean, and also understanding how climate change will affect the marine environment. Now, how can we give answers to these questions? And I think Atlantis, the observation system, starts on the left. We have all the networks, all the great tools and toys and infrastructure that we all love and like and show about, but they are giving us sort of the raw data that then gets put in the middle into data systems, sometimes fused together with ocean system models, and the data then gets harmonized, quality checked, and from the data we produce information products. And it's only the information products that enable the knowledge generation together with society that actually helps to answer these societal needs. So it is more than just having sort of gadgets in the ocean, it's actually the whole flow of information from data to value. Now in Atlantis, the program, we're advancing these in 5 different areas. We have some activity around carbon uptake of the ocean and what role the carbon system in climate plays and what the opportunities are of the ocean to maybe sequester carbon, maybe also more in the future. Very important for the Green Deal that the European Union is putting forward. We have impacts and activities around sargassum. Sargassum, this brown algae, does cause a lot of havoc in the Caribbean, but also in African countries, with beaches being not usable for tourism anymore, and also shifting the ecosystems. Partners are here, Blue Planet and Mbon. We're working with the Ocean Tracking Network and others to predict animal motions, and in particular, the Azores is a very important and interesting site for that. So thank you, Air Center there and the colleagues over there. We're trying to understand better the role of the overturning circulation with programs like CLIVAR and GOOSE. And we're also supporting ecosystem-based management, for example, in upwelling zones of the large fisheries in the Canary upwelling zone, but also in the Benguela system. So these are just some examples how we showcase how we go from observation to information to knowledge and value. But also the other side of Atlantos is about really implementing the global ocean observing system that works across the agendas. And here we're working with GOOSE and Blue Planet to really improve and implement the sharing of instruments, the sharing of equipment, the joint access of the ocean, and also engaging diverse communities from the global north, from the global source, also early careers and things like that. So it's basin scale implementation of the global ocean observing system in the Atlantic that Atlantos, the program, is fostering. I want to come back now to my value cycle, now that I gave you a flavor of programs like the observing programs with the reach into data generation, how we can maybe even bridge that gap between where the scientific experts are and society is, and if there is another and new and sort of in that sequence opportunity ahead of us. And I think that opportunity is around what we call Destination Earth in Europe. It's an activity that talks about digital twins of our Earth system. Now, this digital twin narrative is about building on a computer-based or network-based or model-based twin of the real system. It comes from engineering. When you buy a car today, a ship or an airplane, there always have been digital twins of the object to optimize the engineering of the new car, plane, or ship. But it also should be true for our environmental Earth system or ocean system, that we can use these digital twins of the ocean to understand them better and to also explore futures. But I think what's exciting about them is they can use the observations as shown here on the left, and Atlantos and GOOSE is an example of that. And they can use the data that we're producing in these data centers in the middle here. They can sometimes fuse them with models to provide seamless, regional specific information. And then that information somehow gets communicated out to citizens and stakeholders. So they can connect experts on the left with citizens and users of the information on the right. And I think this digital twin framework is a really exciting way to do it. Now, can we do this in Europe? I think yes, because I think we're actually well set up to do it. Because on the one hand, as I said, we have the great remote sensing system of Copernicus. We have the European Ocean Observing System, which is a great contribution to the global ocean observing system, Atlantis being one piece of it. We also have actors like the Copernicus Marine Services that provide regular and real-time updates of the ocean state. We have EMODNet, European data hold of all the marine data, or at least most of them. And we have activities like the Blue Cloud that take all of that information and connect them out to the citizens. And I think the digital twins are exactly that. They're really taking advantage of these infrastructures, but making them accessible to our citizens. So in a technical definition, one could say these emerging digital twins of the oceans are innovations towards a system that allows us to explore the ocean, to understand its interactions, the dynamics and the evolution of it, and that's important, to provide knowledge to empower fact-based decision-making. So this information is really needed for society, but it must be trusted and must be based on interoperable and trusted data from a wide range of sources, not just for one application, across the board of the ocean agenda. Now, this agenda plays extremely well into the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. I'll speak more about that into a second. And amongst others, that United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development has articulated a particular challenge, Challenge 8, that says, through multi-stakeholder collaboration, develop a comprehensive digital representation of the ocean, which includes a dynamic map, which provides free and open and visual access for exploring, discovering, and visualizing past, present, and future oceans. So in many ways, this digital twin of the ocean connects the expert community here in the middle with societal actors like international science, governments, civil society, the private sector, but also education and ocean literacy. On a more technical arena, what these digital twins are calling for are rapid, standardized, and credited sharings of a digital common, as we say. So it's really sharing the data, the information, the knowledge through a distributed digital commons where the material or the information is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So there's a lot of interesting interoperability, IT technical perspective, which I also think the Air Center is interested in promoting and many others around us. So it's the informatics side together with the domain science of ocean science that can deliver on the infrastructure for a digital twin ocean. But what I find also exciting is that there's new ways and form how we can actually explore and really experience such a digital twin ocean environment. At GEOMAR, we have this frame called ARENA, which is sort of a 180-degree planetarium in small scale, where you can go inside as a scientist and really explore your data, your model, parts of the ocean in an almost three-dimensional way. And I think it's really fantastic how you can immerse yourself into the ocean system and really get an idea of the fascination of the ocean, but also we can display how the ocean will change in the future. And this digital twin ocean frame will really allow us to bring that information that is needed from the observation to the left through a data portal, interoperable and standards and blue science clouds to the actors in society. And I'm waiting for the day that we can have an app on our smartphones that I can point to the ocean landscape that I'm seeing, and I can ask the app, which fish are swimming there? Is there a risk of a harmful algae bloom? Have there ever been tsunamis? Will in the future, can I do a mariculture sighting here? Should it be a protected site? All these type of questions that citizens and decision makers have in a more joined up data infrastructure. Wonderful opportunities of this digital twin of the ocean. And by the way, an important arm of the mission, the Starfish mission that we're developing for Europe, digital twins are a part of that. So colleagues, coming back now to that value cycle, and I just gave you two examples, the observing and mapping side of Atlantos, and also the bringing the information back to the citizens through digital twins. I want to now go a little bit into the question, so what do we do? Now, the society around us asks us about blue-green growth, economic development. How can we take our actions or interaction with the ocean and make them more sustainable? So how can we advance our pathways as humans into a more sustainable, safe and just operating space for the ocean, these so-called ocean pathways? The 2030 agenda gives us some guidance to that, but this is by no means easy. This means transforming the way we do it, carbon neutrality, a lot of protection around the ocean, biodiversity, safeguarding that, and things like that. So how do we do that? And I think we have a fantastic opportunity ahead of us. Starting next year, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development has set out to do exactly that. It actually says, we have a vision. What is the science that we need for the ocean that we want? Now, the ocean that we want is one that provides prosperities for all of humankind in a shared and equitable way. But how do we get there? How can we get out of the non-sustainable behavior we have right now to that ocean that we want? And I think it's the science that can guide us there in many different directions and also hopefully in the right direction. But from the mission point of view, the question then is the science, the ocean science that we have today fit for purpose? And I think the decade says, well, we probably also have to have transformative ocean science solutions, including transforming somewhat the science that we do, supporting sustainable development questions and giving answers. It is really about connecting people with the ocean in an informed and scientific founded way. Now, the decade has 7 what we call societal outcomes, kind of the ocean that we want. So what does the ocean look like that we want? We want a clean ocean, where the source of pollution are identified and hopefully removed. A healthy and resilient ocean, where marine ecosystems are understood, managed, and biodiversity is prospering. We want productive ocean, which supports sustainable food supplies and a sustainable ocean economy. We certainly want predicted ocean, so we can understand and respond and manage the risks around the ocean. We want a safe ocean, where lives and livelihoods are protected from the ocean-related hazards. We want an accessible ocean, where we can understand, see all the information and the data of it. So here the digital twins come in, but also, and I think many of us, in particular when we were younger or not ocean science experts just yet, the ocean is inspiring, engaging, exciting. The deep sea, all the wonders of the ocean are still to be explored. So we're looking for this inspiration in engaging ocean. Now, if you turn that into more the science questions or priorities, the implementation plan for the Ocean Decade lists here a number of them, 10 challenge areas. I'm not going to read all of them, but it's around pollutions. It's about solutions to manage and restore biodiversity and ecosystems. It's about food, sustainably feeding the world's population. It's about equitable and sustainable development in the green-blue economy. It's the ocean climate nexus, extremely important with the Green Deal. What can the ocean provide to the understanding and protection of the climate system? Multi-hazard warning systems that I mentioned. Certainly, without an ocean observing system, few of these things can be accomplished. A digital representation of the ocean, I mentioned the digital twins concept, but also the capacity and capability around the globe to engage in that agenda and to provide and generate the knowledge at the local scale that is needed for sustainable development. And in many ways, we have to identify and overcome the barriers to get the answers to these questions and to get to the ocean that we want. The decade has developed an action framework that you can see here, but I really do wanted to sort of show why I'm excited about it, because the decade, I think, is really the one for the next generation. And there's so many young and aspiring actors out there, and I hope you recognize some of them here that are really fighting for and engaging in action towards a sustainable ocean. And I think the decade, and we as a scientific community owe them our full support and advice of the kinds of actions we can collectively do for the ocean that we want. Now, formally speaking, the decade has programs, projects, activities, and contributions. Contributions are about resources. So any of you on the funding arena, please be kind to the decade and make some resources available in person or in kind. But the decade program are really the global ones, global in scale, maybe regional, but really large scale, that really go after one of these dimensions or challenges that I gave some ideas of to you. And you have the opportunity starting, I think, next week, where the call for decade program is going to be out. And by mid-January, you can propose your ideas, what a decade program could be, and the resource and the team and the agenda behind it. So watch out for that. But I could not say it more often than there now. This is not the UN decade. It's everybody's decade. So it's your decade from the scientific community. It's your decade from the civil science community. It's your decade as a layperson, the public, but also foundations, civil society, and very important, the business and private sector. It's our joint decade. And what are we trying to do? We're really trying to go from a science that is largely complement for problem diagnostic to a science that provides solutions. We want to go from an observing system that is mostly fit for climate purposes and some emerging data services to one that is adequate across the board and delivers the ocean data and information systems for that, niche to norm. We have major knowledge gaps in the ocean, and we are kind of weak on ocean literacy. And I think the decade has this great opportunity to really provide access to all the citizens to become ocean literate and well-informed, so our collective decisions can be sustainable. The funding that we have around ocean science, ocean observing, ocean information is mostly in research mode. Nothing against it, I love research funding, but we need more, and added to that, a clear value chain that I gave you some reason for committing resources on a more sustained level, that ocean science, ocean observing becomes part of what society does. It's not a luxury research project. And there's huge and uneven capacity and capabilities in participating in ocean science and ocean information generating, in particular in the global south and small island states. And the decade really tries to and encourages all of us to engage in activities to partner and work with all of us around us. And I couldn't resist to show one or two slides about some things that we do at GEOMAR. So in Kiel, we have since more than 15 years an exciting partnership with the Cape Verdean community. It used to be ENDP and Friends, now it's the Institut de Mar at Cape Verde. And we together have established the so-called Ocean Science Center in Mindelo, and our friends in the Air Center, in the Azores, also in the Canaries. There's just a wonderful island community, Bermuda included, that discusses and talks about Atlantic Ocean affairs. And they're also wonderful logistical hubs. But in addition to staging ocean science from the Ocean Science Center Mindelo, we're also working in Cape Verde to actually build capacity and educate next generation students with our master's program in climate change and marine science. And I'm extremely proud that since this year, you see the students here, we are having an ongoing effort to really train and bring together the West African community in issues around climate change, and in particular around marine sciences, something which I think is needed. There's a lot of interest in the regions. There is some capacity, but I think by working together with the colleagues and seeing them as a team, and to them seeing themselves as a team, is really a wonderful opportunity to realizing things like the Ocean Decade, digital twins, and ocean observing systems. But now, before I come to the end, I want to showcase another example that we've done in Kiel to actually work with students around the globe to get them interested in that solution thinking. And I'm going to do a little advertising for a massive open online course that we've generated a few years ago. And I hope you will enjoy watching the video with me.
This is the ocean, vast and endless. It encircles the planet, covers 71% of the Earth's surface, and provides more oxygen than all the rainforests combined. It holds unmatched and sometimes untouched natural resources, more than we could ever imagine. Here life began and has been sustained for millennia, harboring secrets we have yet to unlock. This is the ocean, the source of food and energy and the highway for international commerce. Its shores are home to 40% of humanity that lives within 100 kilometers of the coast. It provides sustenance, livelihoods, and links our global economy. But this is also the ocean, a vast yet finite system bearing the telltale signs of our careless lifestyles. It is highly stressed through our growing interventions and is groaning under the burden of pollution and climate change. How can we be good stewards of our planet so that we and future generations can live in harmony with the ocean? Can we use our understanding of the ocean system and human system to change our actions to support human life within safe limits, so that the ocean can continue to sustain its eco-services for us, as it has for so long? Come join us and learn about the ocean and what it means to you. When we put our knowledge together, can we use ocean system thinking to arrive at more sustainable, smarter interactions and solutions leading to better governance?
So what we're doing with that MOOC, the Massive Open Ocean program, it's a course. It's actually open for self-paced learning. You can Google it and sign up for it, it's free. And we have already this year, again, had 8,000 learners from around the globe really trying to think about how can we understand the ocean system and come up with some interesting solution. Now, the course has been constructed 4 or 5 years ago, so some of the modules are a little bit dated, but I still think it's a wonderful opportunity to actually bring in the non-expert community into the arena of ocean science and how that connects through sustainable development. So my final thoughts for you are the following. I actually happen to think, despite all the tough things that are going on around us, that there is hope for ocean optimism. And why do I say that? On the observing side, last year we had the Oceanops conference where more than 1,600 people came together to really think about how can we really advance ocean observing from niche to norm. I see policy changes in the European Union, in the US, also Brazil, and Canada, and Cape Verde, and South Africa, to really take it more serious, to take our ocean observing systems to be more sustained, more fit for purpose, more innovative, and more integrative. So there's hope there that things are advancing, that we can learn more about the ocean, including new exciting space missions, by the way. I also think that at the Belém and Galway agreement have really helped on the policy level to really bring exciting new research, collaboration, and funding opportunities to all of us. I hope more is coming, but it's a great start. We are at the verge of having a mission in Europe, the mission Ocean, the Starfish mission for a healthy and clean ocean and seas in the future. And colleagues, there are only 5 mission proposals on the desk for the European Commission. It is amazing that one of them is around ocean affairs. That is just fantastic. And we should really support the mission going forward and give all the political and community and citizen support that it comes to fruition. It'll be a wonderful opportunity around this agenda. And then with all the data and information that we're gathering, this emerging ideas of digital twin ocean, there's a call in Horizon 2020, but that's just an innovation action. But there's a much more significant activity around this destination Earth concept, about digital twin Earth concepts. And again, this will give us a great opportunity to advance our sharing of the data, interoperability, and making what we know available to citizens around the planet. And last but not least, international efforts like the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, and things like that are really giving us more visibility in our communities that the ocean is an important part of our life, of the Earth system, but also of human prosperity. So to me, there's an ocean of opportunity for all of us to go around, and it is really an area of collaboration. And when we work together, we can make a difference. If we work apart, that won't work so well. So thanks again to the Air Center. Thanks again to all of you listening. And Isabel, back to you. I'm really looking forward to a little bit of a discussion starting now.
Well, thank you, Martin, for another inspiration presentation. I have already some questions here. The one is one that you already kind of answered, but I would put this together. So there's Norma Munoz that wants to know how they can collaborate and integrate the Atlantos program. I'm sure others that are listening to us will have similar questions. So you already send them to Sandra, but do you have any more things to say about this?
Yes, so thanks again for noting Atlantos, the program. And as we say, it's a great opportunity for you to get engaged with the colleagues around the Atlantic Basin. It is a part of the Global Ocean Observing System. It's also part of GeoBlue Planet. That means anything to you, but it doesn't have to, because what we want, we are trying to really bring forward communities, and we're quite active in some areas. And there's a website you can look up in the Atlantos. I forgot the exact URL. Maybe somebody can put it in the chat. Oh, there it is. I just saw Brad putting it in. So it's called www.atlantos-ocean.org. And there you can find some information. We're working on a new version of the website, but I encourage you to please get in contact with us, and we can put you in contact with some of the great activities that we have in some of the groups that advance certain use cases. We have 5 of them, as I said, but also if you're interested to work with us as part of a network in the full implementation of the global ocean observing system in the Atlantic Ocean basin. And it's because it is not easy to get access, but by working together, sharing our resources, and also establishing good and best practices around that, I think we can go a great mile forward, and every contribution is highly welcomed. And we'd be more than happy to work with you, to connect you with the experts, and to really see what you can contribute to our joint up and sort of joint observing activity through Atlantos for the Atlantic Basin and the global ocean observing system and GeoBlue Planet more globally. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I also have a question regarding how you see the emerging economies in Africa that you actually mentioned specifically. How can they contribute for the digital twin ocean, since they lack infrastructure, funds, technology, and more important, they don't have enough human capital? Well, you already said that there are some actions on capacity building, but how can they really enter this digital twin that looks a little bit futuristic? Yeah.
Yes, Isabel. Look, we're becoming old timers here in this game. The digital twins are for the early careers, I would say. But look, colleagues, that on a serious note, I mean, I really think the future of our planet and of the ocean in particular really depends on us working together. And the area where we're going to see the most dramatic change is around Africa. There's no doubt in my mind. So I think, Isabel, it means people like yourself, like myself, some way, somehow, we have to make this a priority of the things that we do. So personally, I made it a bit of priority of my work to always make sure, how can I bring in the African perspective? How can we talk with the African community about the things that we do? And I found one mode to operate that I found helpful is this, what I call twinning. So it's a bit like you at your university, Isabel, think about who could be a good group in Africa that I want to have a long-term relationship with, that I really want to work with almost like a cousin or a twin. And we've decided for the GEOMAR, for the Kiel community, that Cape Verde is our prime partner. That's not the only partner. We're working with Angola, we're working with Namibia, we're working with Senegal, certainly South Africa, but we have a prime partnership with the Cape Verdean community, and that allows us to really build long and lasting relationships and to support the Cape Verdean colleagues in building up their capability and capacity. In theory, the digital world would allow us to be more equitable around the globe, because formally all the information and data are accessible to all, almost for free. But in practice, unless you have the education and the little means to actually access that digital commons, you will be left behind again. So I think it is extremely important to make sure that around the Atlantic, we really generate computer literate, informatics literate, data literate, information literate communities. So that is an educational challenge for the university in Porto, for the university in the Azores, and from all of your universities that you're listening on, to somehow think about, is my university really working with the African colleagues, talking to them, partnering with them? That is the way we can get everybody on the same page. And I can say that from my own experience, when I started as an oceanographer in Kiel, we benefited tremendously from a deep partnership with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. They taught us how to run a CTD. They taught us how to do proper processing. We had no idea at the time, or little idea. But now these things have been more on par. We are equal partners now. But I think we should do the same. The benefits that we had as growing into the international community, we want to bring in our African community. And I want to also bring them in because I am learning so much from the African perspective. The African perspective of the ocean is really exciting to me. It's much more holistic. It's much more focused on human development than the Kiel perspective used to be. That was more academic. How can I write the next science paper or nature paper and things like that? The Africans come at it with a much more practical oriented view. And I appreciate that. That is a great perspective to have. So I think that exchange of views, of capabilities is key. But yes, to the question, the colleague of questions, indeed, it is a joint responsibility to provide facilities and access and means, financial means as well, to really allow the full participation in these endeavors, including digital twins or observing. And by the way, ocean observing is not only high tech. You can do a lot with low tech in the coastal arena, where every citizen can contribute to the integrated global observing system. Yes, there are satellites and ships and things, but there's also an enormous wealth that can be generated by traditional knowledge, by citizen-generated knowledge, and a good digital twin environment would fully uptake all of that knowledge as well.
Well, yeah, I definitely would like to stress that there is a lot of need actually for human observations, and that usually we don't hear about them very much. And for biological observations and for coastal observations, really can do a lot with people, with very simple technologies. And also you can do with citizens and young people and fishermen and all. They are really very important and very important because they have observation. They know how to observe some of these things better than sometimes the scientists. Well, but actually connected with that, I have here a question that is a little bit different and has to do with this need that we have, that you have talked about, of linking with society. And there is João Lorenzetti that asks, you know, we as scientists, we are rewarded, as you say, you know, to write papers and good journals and all this. So how do you think we can be convinced, or we can convince our students and at this point, really to spend their time and their resources, really to do this more, this connection with people that really does not very often results in papers or in high profile papers and so on?
Well, that is a great question, Isabel, and let me try to unpack that a bit. So when I spoke about the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, some of my scientific colleagues think, oh, that's great. They're going to give us a lot of funding to do more of the science that I always wanted to do. Well, I hope that's true. But honestly, the decade has a much more ambitious goal. It actually also talks about the transformation of the science system to be more responsive to the societal needs. Isabel and I, we got tenure because we published wonderful papers in journals that no citizens can ever read because you don't even get through the abstract unless you have an expert translating that to you. And I'm not ridiculing that. That is very important to generate new knowledge, discovery, and all of that. So that's just fine. But how can we supplement or complement that with a system that actually also gives us credit for somehow engaging deeply in making the knowledge that we have available for practical use for the societies around us? For example, Isabel, you yourself, I see the logo there. IPBES is a great example. I mean, in many ways, it's volunteer work. And some of us say our engagement was, in your case, IPBES, for me was IPCC or the ocean assessment, probably made more of a difference to society than our highly cited Nature or Science paper. But somehow, when you talk to our deans at the universities, they think your Science and Nature paper is so much more important than your co-authorship or attending these endless sets of international meetings in these assessments. So somehow we need to transform also our reward and science system, that engagement in making data information available for practical purposes is recognized as an alternative or an additional means of recognition to the academic credentials that I don't want to be critical about. I love them, but we need to have a system that adds to that. It also speaks to us in Atlantos, because when you're generating a new data set and you don't get a high profile publication out of it, it might not get you tenure. But if the DOIs that go along with the data set get properly referenced and it's used a lot, you should see that you actually produce something of high value that should get you tenure in your respective maybe data producing organization. So again, there's a need to transform also the way in which we do and evaluate our science. And on the doing end, you know, science most often goes a bit more, you should do this, don't do that. You know, we kind of like tell people what to do. I don't think that's the greatest way to actually get engagement. It should be about dialogue, exchanging of views, you know, bringing in perspectives and allowing also others to be heard and to also listen to the more, maybe less loud voices. Sorry, I have a loud voice, but to listen more to the less loud voices to see what they have to say. Quite often there's a lot of wisdom there that we should take more serious. So it's really rewarding the culture of dialogue, the culture of working together, the culture of uplifting and working together, and little less so the culture of being on the top and getting every awards for me. You know, I got the medals and everything like that. No, let's reward uplifting, community building, much more so in the future. And I think that's, to me, another exciting element of this ocean science decade, because that is what we need if we want to be successful in informing sustainable development.
Yeah, I think all about collaboration. I mean, we can have the big guys, but we can go much further, I think, if we have a collaboration even with small guys like me. But anyway, there is another question here from Milton Campbell from Brazil, and he would like to know your vision or proposal for sustainable funding over time to support large-scale monitoring activities as mentioned in your presentation.
Yeah.
Some kind of international body or across individual countries. Yeah, I think.
So I think that is an excellent question. And, you know, I wish you had the answer and I can help you to implement it. But I will say is, and it's great to see Monica and Mulbert here on the chat, you know, because we need to get a broader participation in these circles like the Ocean Obs meetings, because somehow we have not been so successful in informing our fellow citizens why engaging in ocean observing is actually great for them. People don't question so much our engagement in weather observing, because it's clear to everybody that if you want to have a good weather forecast, you better do some weather observations. But in somehow that connection doesn't so easily go through to ocean observing. So I would say if we want to have a future in marine food production, you know, observing ecosystems is essential, because otherwise you cannot manage that well. If you want to have good spatial plans around our ocean coastline, marine spatial plan or ecosystem-based management options, well, unless you know what's there and how it's changed over time, it'll be tough to say something intelligent about it. On land, nobody questions that. We have a lot of these observations on land to inform zoning decisions. But the zoning decision on the ocean are often made in the abstract and quite often not made, often because of the lack of information. So it is a bit for us to work with our colleagues through ocean literacy, through data availability, make it easy to access our information, to really up the game here a bit and really showcase to the community that ocean observing is vital for our societies and not just for ocean experts. I think that is the ticket to getting more sustainable resources. And yes, foundations can be of help. There's a great discussion going on with the National Academy of Sciences in the United States, how to fund sustained observing system in addition to government resources. We're looking at this also in the European level. What's the role of the private sector? Should there be taxes? Whatever it might be. But I do think the key to success will be the recognition in society that ocean information is essential. It's not a luxury. It's not something scientists do. It's sort of a life-supporting activity of humans and human prosperity. That would be my perspective on this. But I wish, and I would invite all of you to share your thoughts, how we can accomplish that. And I think it's also one of the aims of the decade to really become better. I want to leave the decade in a way that we don't have to fight for every observing system sort of on a 3-year basis.
Yeah. Well, we are at the end of our time. I will look for instructions from our organizers. If I can continue a little bit, there's still several unanswered questions. But
I think we have
Yes,
5 or 10
please.
more minutes, Isabel, if you want. I
Yes.
can go 10 more minutes and then I have to sign off.
Okay.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so actually I have a question here about, oops, right. If you still believe that, it's coming from Eva-Lisa Fischer, that the whole Atlantic as well as in the future global ocean is already a MPA, which only has to be managed by the ocean communities in regard to future human intrinsic values with the highest priority, meaning a drastic reduction of the consumption of food, materials, substance, and so on. I think this is how you see the management really of the ocean.
So Isabel, I think I look at for that almost to you, but I'm hearing interesting proposals how we could actually think about a more sustainable ecological system of, say, let's say the Atlantic, how we can think about a sustainable capture fish that doesn't at an industrial scale ruin everything. And I'm not an expert on this, and you are much more than me, but I must say I'm very attracted by this idea that in the high seas, meaning outside the EEZs of countries, we should just disallow fishing, period. Just make the whole high sea a protected area. There's interesting economic studies that people told me about, and I've tried to read some of them, that basically say this is actually not an impractical suggestion, because most of the fisheries that we have straddle the open ocean and the EEZs of countries. But if it was then not allowed on the high seas, then the EEZs would be doing arrangements with fishing organizations and allowing them to fish with some taxes and things like that. And it would probably be managed so they don't get exploited overduly. But also the high seas would be the regeneration area where the overspill comes to the EEZ, where you properly manage your fisheries. Systems like that to me seem quite attractive. It is also true that we are overusing part of the ocean ecosystem in a non-sustainable way, and sometimes for no good reason, actually. There are some substitutes for some of the things we do there, though, so it's almost like benign neglect rather than good economic opportunity. And also from an economic point of view, highly industrialized fisheries doesn't generate a lot of jobs. It does catch a lot of fish though, but you kind of wonder whether that's our most efficient way to actually get access to high quality nutrients, or whether there's also some wasteful activity going on with the highly industrialized fisheries. So all these questions should be looked into, whether or not we can figure out a more sustainable blue-green economy that actually supports more jobs. And sometimes we can do this with a little less industrial sort of methods that are more precise and more sustainable, and still would be able to feed the population that we want to feed, but it's also lower trophic levels, mariculture. There's a lot of opportunity out there that requires innovation, research, and governance systems. So the governance question is important. I do think with the zoning laws around the ocean need to be much more strengthened. There needs to be more discussion around nations. The European Union is doing a lot in that arena. It's actually seen as one of the regions which is embarked on a difficult challenge to do it collectively. It's not always easy, but we're trying. It's not always great what we do, but it's a good start. But I think we can do that more of, and also at the basin scale. And I want to see, and I hope that, again, through digital twins that give us the information, but it's the governance that is so much needed. And I hope that also the Galway and Belém agreements also will focus a bit more on the governance arrangements that we need to protect the biodiversity, to protect the deep sea, also in international borders. BB&J has been mentioned here a little bit, but also really for coastal states, give them guidance, best practice, how they can actually manage and zone their own EEZ properly, so that it becomes an ecosystem that is treasured today, but also supporting livelihoods for the next generation.
Well, thank you. I certainly support this, and also trade-offs between what we call the different ecosystem services. So the fisheries is just one ecosystem service, and really is degrading many others. So we need to put also in the balance as the interest for everyone, for all humanity, what is really more important, to continue to fish in the high seas or to really manage it in a different way. And I think that's why it's important to have more knowledge and information. And I think this digital twin that we putting together really all and bringing together data models and so on could really give us more, and also, you know, with the economic data, of course. I mean, a lot of these fisheries are subsidized. The subsidies that fisheries are receiving is enormous, and they are receiving this to do something that is unsustainable and that is really going to hurt future generations and not allow them to have the same resources. So anyway, if you still can answer another question, this is maybe it's completely different. And this is from Luis Matias that wants to know your perspective on the use of submarine telecom office optical fiber cables to monitor deep ocean.
Yep.
I don't know if you need more details.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I know what this is all about. So, which I didn't say, I could have said, there's many services the oceans do for us, but some of you know that about 98% of the telecommunication, actually almost, I would say, more than half the participants on this particular video conference probably going to get their information through some sea cables. So sea cables and the fiber optic cables are really facilitating the global connectivity of what we call the internet. Now, these cables are real cables. They go across the ocean, zigzag, not everywhere, but in special locations. They have every, I think, 50 or 100 kilometers repeater, an amplification node there. And so there is a question whether we could use those infrastructures, for example, like these fiber optic cables, to be observatories of the ocean. And so there's some interesting projects out there that say, can we use these amplifying nodes to also add to them like a pressure sensor and some other sensors, so they become not only the cables that support the communication, but also the cables that support ocean observing. I find that as a fascinating proposal. There's many questions around it, where there are, you know, calibration and things like that, but it basically speaks to the more generic issues that how can we fully entrain and maybe even demand that the commercial activities in the oceans also provide their share to an ocean observing system, and how can they take advantage of their infrastructures that they are there for different purposes, but to also supply information for the general ocean state. And that is also true for oil and gas rigging, that can be true for offshore mariculture installations, that can be true for any kind of ship around the ocean, from the pleasure craft of a sailboat down to a big ocean tanker. They could have science bays in them. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to actually take private sector engagement and activity in the ocean and work with them and allow them to partake in the ocean observing system with all the limitations they might have. I think it's a very productive interface, and it's something I wish to see more discussions around, and maybe some funding around. And I think some of the private corporations see that as a possibility to show to the world that they're not only dealing with us on an economic basis, but they're also willing to give back in corporate social responsibility arena. And I think what better than being partners in an ocean observing system as part of the CSR strategy of such companies. And we should welcome that, rather than telling them, oh, you're the bad guys, you're polluting the ocean. They might do that too, but there's also an opportunity to get them involved in ocean observing system and engage them in discussion and talk to them about practices, and maybe figure out ways in which they can do it a bit more sustainable than many of them do now. I think these are conversations that we can have. I know the Air Center is engaging in, and I think these are good conversations to have, because it's our collective future that we're talking about. And the ocean really needs all of us to sort of think about how can we make our human action more sustainable towards the ocean.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and especially if they do that, when they design the boats and design all this infrastructure, if this equipment were already foreseen, this could really increase dramatically our capability of doing ocean observation without perhaps too much cost. Well, it will be some cost, but the cost would be supported by these businesses. I don't know, we have now 10 minutes past the hour. If we can finish, there's still, and answer questions, you probably will get them and try to respond. So thank you very much for this. This was really great talk and discussion. Thank you for all of those that attended. And I don't know, José Luis, do you want to say something about next week?
Oh, just to say a few words about next week, we will have our All-Atlantic Summit based in Penn State, and I will leave you with the link so if you wanted to register. But I will give you the floor back to you and to Martin to close the session.
Yes, thanks again, Isabel, being such a great host. It was great to have this conversation, with all of these colleagues listening in to us. Colleagues, thank you very much for the time that you made in your calendar to be with us. Great questions, I really appreciate it, and I'm quite looking forward to future engagement with you, either in the context of Atlantos, or in the context of digital twins, or in the context of the UN decades, or with biodiversity questions. So many things we can do together. So thanks again, and have a great day, and always keep in mind the ocean needs our support. Thank you. Well, and I don't have anything else to say, so have a good evening or a good day, and goodbye. Thank you all for attending.